So let's read the report of Skull&Bones by Ethan Gach, who is working at Kodaku, and he has apparently talked with multiple sources on what the hell is going on with this game. So the game was first shown in 2017 and then disappeared basically. Sources are split over what happened. Some say, despite the well-received E3 blowouts, the game effectively didn't exist. Oh boy, we have heard this quite a bit when developers and publishers are coming to E3 and show off their games, and the literal only thing they have is the shown piece of the game at the E3. Like nothing else exists. It is this small part of the game which exists, which works in its own, but nothing else does. Others argue that the version of what was playable at the industry events could have launched roughly on time in early access and matured in the wild as other games as a service have. Vertical slice. Years later, the game is still struggling to take shape and people are running on empty. A lot of stuff still doesn't make sense, said one former developer. Just polishing it at this point would be a waste of time. Skull&Bones was originally supposed to launch in late 2018, then sometime in 2019, then sometimes after March 2020, then sometime before March 2022, and now it's due to come out before March 2023. That's 4 big delays in just 3 years. Even from a company with a reputation of rescheduling like Ubisoft, yeah, they do quite a bit, and that's fine. It raises red flags about the project's future and the fates of those working on it. Yeah, like it's a problem when you are basically announcing a game in 2017 and in 2021 you are saying maybe this game is coming out in 2023, maybe, not sure. But up to this point, its development has been marred by just about everything that can go wrong in blockbuster video game production. Doesn't really surprise us right now with Ubisoft. And by the way, for everyone watching this on YouTube right now, keep in mind that I'm also streaming this right now. So if I'm sometimes talking to people and you can see my cam here, hi, this is because we are streaming. No one believed February 2022 for launch, but you always hope. One current developer told Kodaku following the last delay. Okay. That earnings call found Ubisoft Access scrambling to explain yet another setback. It's a bit like other game studios, right? The Blizzard magic or something like that. Or the BioWare magic, where people truly believe that the game is just ending up being coupled together and it works. It's like, yeah, no. Production, led by Ubisoft Singapore, has been advancing well over the past 12 months, and the promise is better than ever. Ubisoft CFO Frédéric Degas said during the same meeting, the additional time will allow the team to fully deliver on its vision. But interviews with more than 20 current and former Ubisoft developers, as well as those with knowledge of the game, its troubled development, and the studio leading production on it, tell a different story. Skull&Bones never had a clear creative vision behind it, suffered from too many managers vying for power, and was plagued by almost annual reboots and menu refreshes, they said. Years into development, basic questions around the game's core design still haven't been nailed down, even as ambitions for the word-be game as service continue to mount within Ubisoft's head Paris office. Yeah, I think this is a big problem here. This is a problem I have been seeing with Ubisoft for quite some time. They have a game, like Skull&Bones, and it would have been so simple. Just make it Assassin's Creed, Black Flag, online with a bigger world, just utilize that, bam, right? But then some people were like, nah, we need more, and most importantly, we need to make it as a game as a service. So we have to keep the people playing, we have to make them come back, we have to release like seasonal updates, battle passes. It's just like, folks, stop. Think about the gameplay first. Think about what you want. And then think about that stupid games as a service. But of course, companies do not allow that. Like, you have to think about how to do the business first before you're thinking about the game. And Ubisoft, unfortunately, has a good amount of games in the past few years where exactly that thinking was not boding well for those games. And if you want to have another publisher or developer who basically broke their neck on this, Anthem. Anthem is just a wonderful example of a game focusing so much to be a games as a service product instead of being a video game first. All of these people were granted anonymity because they were either not authorized to speak to the press about the project or feared that speaking out about a past employer might hurt their careers in the video game industry. Yeah, this is unfortunately very true. I know that some people will say, nah, this is Kotaku, this is not real, they are lying. Kotaku has been, even after Jason Schreier left, has been really, really good on reports. And again, they cannot tell you the sources. Those people would never talk to a journalist ever again, and more importantly, they would never find a job in the gaming industry ever again. Like, just so you can be proven right, or just so Kotaku can be proven right, they can't. They would destroy lives with that. So I believe them, though, because I have been working in the game industry for 10 years. I have been a journalist, and this is how it goes. You believe it or you don't believe it. But most of the developers I have been talking to in those 10 years, they have always been telling the truth. Especially the smaller developers, not the big shots. Like, basically the underlings have always been telling the truth because they have mostly enough of the bullshit. Nearly 8 years after it was, well, I think my new word is done, which is happening in the background. Give me just a second here. Yeah, we are waiting for the new word queue if you're like, what the hell was that? Nearly 8 years after it was first conceived, Skull&Bones has blown through its initial budgets. According to the three sources, the project has already cost Ubisoft more than 120 million US dollars, with that number continuing to balloon as hundreds of developers from other Ubisoft studios continue pitching in to try and ship the game without any more delays. Ubisoft developers receive project-based bonuses based on how well their games do. Those attached to big, nearly annual franchises like Assassin's Creed are often assured healthy payouts. But Skull&Bones was so in the hole, sources told Kotaku that the project had to undergo a financial write-off internally for its developers to still have a shot at any sort of payout. Wow. No one wants to admit they fucked up, said one developer. It's too big to fail, just like the banks in the US. If Skull&Bones were at a competitor, it would have been killed 10 times already. Damn. More generously, another developer said that Electronic Arts or Take-Two, for example, probably wouldn't have attempted it in the first place. Either way, Ubisoft has bet big on multiplayer pirate adventure and is determined to ship it one way or another. In part, that's because live service games have become an increasingly important and lucrative part of the Assassin's Creed publisher's portfolio. But three sources also told Kotaku that a deal with the Singapore government requires it. In addition to hiring a certain number of people at its Singapore studio in exchange for generous subsidies, they said Ubisoft Singapore must also launch original brand new IPs in the next few years. Oh, that's interesting if that is true. Like those, like I know that some people will say, what? No. Yes, those deals happen more and more often in the video game industry. There was actually one in particular which was regarding Cyberpunk. CD Projekt Red basically got a loan from the Polish government, And there were some ifs and whens to it, what they had to do to get that money. So it is not too unreasonable. Like, this happens more and more often around the world. Yeah, this totally can happen. Production has dragged on for years, but many current and former developers say they still have little to show for it. One current developer compared the project's trajectory to BioWare's Anthem. Yeah, that's what I said. That's not good. Another big multiplayer game as a service that looked great in demos, but launched broken and incomplete. Some on the core team developing Skull&Bones are hopeful they can still avoid a similar fate, but are also incredibly desperate to ship the game and move on to something new. Just having people working for 4 or 5 years on something that doesn't move forward, that destroys anyone, said one former developer. In response to a detailed list of questions, Ubisoft confirmed to Kotaku that Skull&Bones just passed alpha and provided the following brief statement. The Skull&Bone team are proud of the work they have accomplished on the project since the last update, with production just passing alpha, and are excited to share more details when the time is right. That being said, any unfounded speculation about the game or decisions being made only works to demoralize the team, who are working very hard to develop on an ambitious new franchise that lives up to the expectation of our shareholders and players. Over the past year, we have made significant changes to our policies and processes to create a safe, more inclusive workplace and empower our teams to create games that reflect the diversity of the world we live in. Well, that was not really topic here at all, so cool, nice that you mentioned it, nobody gives a damn. But yeah, this is, like, keep in mind, this game was announced in 2017, and in 2021 they have finally reached the alpha state. Oh boy. Oh boy. The idea was simple. Ubisoft Singapore was responsible for developing selling tech that helped define some of the best parts of Black Flag, and had recently gained experience in online multiplayer games with its ongoing work on a free-to-play Tom Clancy game called Ghost Recon Phantoms. Oh, wait, they were responsible for Ghost Recon Phantoms? Yikes! I have played that game. Yeah. Let's say they got some experience from that. Sure. Yeah. It was an experience. Yeah. Let's call it an experience. Cool. Black Flag Infinite would pool that expertise to make a quick turnaround live service game that would reuse and reskin as much of Black Flag as possible. Yeah, that was basically the idea. But conditions on the ground were already beginning to outstrip these modest ambitions. Yeah, that's the question why. Because I heard the same thing years ago, that was the idea. Taking Black Flag, reskinning it wherever possible, adding multiplayer to it. Bam. That was the business. Yeah, I know, Pirate. Nobody is listening to you and your game ideas. I'm sorry. The PlayStation 4 and Xbox One had just come out, and in the years ahead, Black Flag's already aging tech would become even more dated. True, that is certainly a problem when you were starting to work on a game, when you were still on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 technology, and now you are on PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series technology. Like, that's a huge difference. I can see that as a problem. Technology was moving forward, and pretty soon you want better visuals, and then you realize that some of your assets don't fit anymore. Yeah. And the more and more you start to change, the more parts become obsolete, and when the project drags for more than a couple of years, your initial assumptions are no longer valid. Yeah, that's a problem. Ubisoft eventually decided to leave Black Flag behind and created a new AAA IP that would still revolve around ship combat, but its own narrative and visual identity. And so Skull&Bones codenamed Project Liberty, was born. Liberté? Liberté. Well, close. But the real trouble was just getting started. We have a Duke Nukem Forever situation? Kinda. On paper, Skull&Bones looks like it's an easy game to make, but it's really not. Skull&Bones has been a lot of things in the years since it entered pre-production, developers told Kotaku. At one point, it was set in the Caribbean. Later, it moved to the Indian Ocean. One version was inspired by Sid Meier's Pirates and played out in a fantastical world called Hyperborea through branching multiplayer campaigns that lasted weeks. Another revolved around the elaborate floating base called Libertalia, a cathedral on water, as one developer described it, and inspired by the mythical pirate colony of the same name, so Sea of Thieves. Most of these ideas never made it past through the prototyping phase, but still managed to take up an increasing amount of Singapore studios' time as developers reworked designs and concepts for a game whose core premise appeared to change with the wind. Yeah, so they basically nailed the combat, but everything out of that, not so much. By 2017, the studios tried to rein in its ambition to focus on ship combat, and Skull&Bones was once again reborn. This time, a session-based shooter modeled after Rainbow Six Siege, but with boats. This was the version that was revealed at E3, but Ubisoft wasn't ready to ditch dreams of a grander pirate exploration game just yet. It would still need a world and quests beyond monetizable PvP grind. So in 2018, Skull&Bones returned to E3 with a PvE free roam mode called Hunting Grounds. Here, similar to the Division's Dark Zones, player could loot hideouts, fight one another, or work together to take in more powerful AI opponents. But this version of the game would eventually get scrapped too, and by 2019, survivor games like Rust and Ark Survival Evolved became Skull&Bones' new guiding star. Oh no, it became Atlas? Oh no. In addition to the sailing, fighting, and looting, there would be resource management elements like crafting and trading. There would also be harsher stakes for dying, adding a roguelite edge to the pirate fantasy. It was particularly messy change in direction, according to 5 current and former developers. The project's existing engine tools were ill-equipped to take players exploring on land for resources, and the additional layers of inventory were a pain to try and implement, they said. Oh boy. By 2020, direction had shifted yet again. 4 current and former developers told Kotaku the latest build of Skull&Bones will be different still, though many remain unsure what shape the finished game will ultimately take. It is not just that it isn't close to the finish line yet, it's still not even clear where the finish line is. The game is still evolving, said one current developer. Everyone knows what an Ubisoft game is supposed to be, and the designer simply isn't there yet. Well, you mean an always repeating mess? Is that what you were aiming at? How much do we have left? Yikes. Oh boy. Let's speed this up a bit. There's still a lot to go. Ask 5 different Skull&Bones developer what went wrong, and you get 10 different answers. Some blame the lack of clear direction from above, with decisions filtering through too many senior leads and few willing to take responsibility for making difficult calls, as per usual. Others feel the project was rushed from the beginning, always settling on the quickest short-term solution to a problem that would inevitably become a major headache later on. Ubisoft Singapore is also new to shipping original blockbuster games, and some developers believe the studio simply wasn't ready yet, while others blame editorial, that thing, for trying to design the game by committee. Things always go wrong during game development, but with Skull and Bones, they rarely seem to go right. Here's the problem. Ubisoft as a studio, I think Ubisoft is the worst publisher when it comes to acting and reacting to problems. Because Ubisoft over the past decade has basically only developed the same game over and over again with some changes here and there. This is why the joke is going around that a lot of the Ubisoft games feel all the same. Because they do. And the thing is that Ubisoft is working like a well-oiled machine. Yes, the games are repeating themselves, but because of that, Ubisoft can work quickly. This is why they can push out games in like 2 years. Because it's all a well-oiled machine and everyone knows the step to the next game already, because they have done similar games before. And it seems like that Skull and Bones was moving away from that formula. Things went wrong, and Ubisoft was like, problems? What do you mean we have problems? We never had problems. What are we doing? So, yeah. Like again, it's this is a big problem studios sometimes have, and especially Ubisoft has. The project is now in its third creative director, Elizabeth Palin, who was formerly a vice president of editorials in Ubisoft Paris office. Before her, it was Justin Farron, who said had great ideas but lacked a clear vision for the game that aligned with HQ ambitions. And before that, it was Sebastian Pearl, a long-time Assassin's Creed producer from the Montreal office, who had little experience in designing a multiplayer game, they said. Like, every time I read this, I really have the feeling that Ubisoft is also shooting themselves in the foot, because now they want multiplayer, live service, multiplayer, live service. It's like, do you have any other terms in your vocabulary? Because I sometimes have the feeling you don't. Every time we got feedback from Paris, they would just freak out and change everything, and then change the people working on it, and that happened multiple times. Yeah, that's also a problem. Like, as far as we know, everything is under the umbrella in Paris, and Paris has a great influence when it comes to changing games. They have basically no say in it, or they shouldn't have any say in it. And this seems to be like another problem. Each new regime would try to put its own mark on the project. Yeah. Don't finish up the work of others. Always make your own thing. Beyond staffing, but would eventually relearn the same hard lessons as earlier groups. Fundamental questions like, do you play as a pirate or do you play as a boat, were constantly closed and reopened. Okay, at E3 17 it was, and 2018 it was the latter. But after Palin took over, the team was tasked with letting players go ashore to explore islands on foot. Yeah, we already heard about that. That doesn't go too well. Production was moving ahead, but the designs were regressing. They started asking the whole team for the first 2016 design documents because that's what they wanted to do again. We went full circuit just plus a giant layer of crafting. Wow. Crazy. Zero chance like Warframe. So they would always pitch something different. It's a classic case of mismanagement for 8 years. Instead of adding layers of value, was kept running around in a loop. The messy prototyping phase aren't unusual, but in Skull&Bones, it never stopped. Yeah. When you have prototype for prototype, it sounds very similar to the problems Anthem had, where they basically didn't have like any concept or idea beyond the whole thing of you're in a mech and you can fly around. And it seems like this is the same issue. Instead of dropping back down to a small core team of several dozen who could find the fun and hammer out a new version of the game, hundreds were left to keep working on unclear priorities, never quite sure just how dramatically the scope and direction had actually shifted. Whenever the game shape pivoted, the requirements, the progression, and the economy and the player motivation would also have pivoted, said one former developer. In the session-based shooter version of the game, pretty much all you care about is maybe ammunition, how good you are at turning, and what your level is. Maybe when you become a survival game, you need to care about things like how big is my hold, how many bananas can I carry, how do I maximize my profits by selling this stuff. Throughout these debates, teams were given work to keep them busy. Some happily obliged, turning out high-quality assets and designs the same they might if they were supporting the Montreal or Quebec studio on the latest Assassin's Creed, only for that work to become obsolete. Others took their foot off the gas, tired of beating themselves up while the project spun its wheels. So, if I understand this correctly, they still didn't know what the project was, but people worked on things, wasting resources, wasting manpower, instead of telling the people, stop, no work, we have to figure out what we do, and then we can do it. You don't let your team push too hard when nothing is settled. Yeah, that's exactly it. You don't push quality to the sky on stuff that would just get thrown out months later. Exactly that. Yeah. There has been an exodus. Okay, it's one of the only projects I've seen whereas we were going, the team became more and more junior because all the talent and all the experience would leave constantly. People would learn about the project, see how it works and everything around it, and then leave. It was constant. Yeah, I can see that. The Glassdoor review page for Ubisoft Singapore is full of complaints about uncompetitive salaries. I mean, don't get me wrong here, but yeah, I mean, why do you believe good old Ubisoft was opening up a studio in Singapore? Like, especially for those reasons. Like I know this sounds unfair, but unfortunately, there are a lot of studios who now open up studios in Singapore, somewhere in China, because they have to pay less and they have tons of people they can go through. It sucks. The toxic culture permitting the Singapore studio is no small part responsible for most of the production issues, reboots, rebrands, and re-reboots. Makes sense? Man. The reason they love to hang out with us in Eastern Europe? Yeah? Like, that's totally one of the reasons. They can get rid of the people faster. If they're not doing what they want, they have to pay them less. Cool. So, yeah, it seems like this seems to be like the big problem. It sucks. Like, I don't have any expectations for Skull and Bones at this point anymore. And it's really, really heartbreaking, because the concept was relatively simple, and because management, well, was deciding multiple times that they want something else. This is a mess. Yeah, I'm not even sure if we will actually see this game in 2023, or maybe they would just cancel it. Who knows? Who knows? But yeah, this sucks very much. But again, was to be expected when you were developing a game for nearly, 7 years? And some of the prototypes, like, it was announced in 2017, but it was already in development before that. So, yeah. Like, this is an absolute mess. Will Ubisoft come back from this? Probably not. Because the biggest problem at Ubisoft right now is Ubisoft itself. Like, the internal work culture and how they handle problems, aka there are no problems. As long as you are not getting rid of that, and as long as you are not learning to adapt, they will not change. And unfortunately, Ubisoft has not really shown that they want to adapt and that they want to change. Like, the best example of something like that is Square Enix with Final Fantasy XIV, where they really just had to acknowledge first that they screwed it up, and that the people at the top, the management, screwed up the most. So, but what we have seen from Ubisoft, that will never happen. Well, that's apparently the update, the only update we will get for a while when it comes to Skull and Bones, and it's not a great one. So I will definitely keep you posted whenever we have a new update on Skull and Bones. And I would love to see this game getting realized at some point and being actually a fun game, which is not just there to get all the microtransactions, or getting all the money out of my wallet. That would be great. Alright, thank you so much for watching. I know this is not the message a lot of Skull and Bones fans wanted to see, but if you still enjoyed this video, I would appreciate if you might consider to give it a like. If you're also new to the channel and you want to see more gaming news, more reaction videos, and just more information about the gaming world, then I would also appreciate if you might consider to subscribe to the channel. With that said, thank you so much for watching. See you next time.